One thing that I really like about Logic Apps is it allows me to create very lean stack. So I'm not spinning up a VM. I'm not writing a service that has to run in the background, that has to be monitored. All of it is very visual. That is what I absolutely love about Logic Apps and Power Automate as well. But let's just look at Logic Apps for a second. Let's do something. Let's do a trigger for when a HTTP request is received. Now, if you're out there and you're a coder, you understand that when you run, you can create an API call so that something will happen when you send it a URL. Well, this is a super easy way to set up a really basic API call. So let's make a hello world out of this very simple Logic app that you see on your screen. So let's see, we've already got a GET request basically here, but I can go down here and I can confirm. I can say method GET. So I've got a GET request. It's not asking for anything in the body right here. I'm just going to save this and I'm going to do a new step and I'm going to say response. And let's do response 200. Let's say response body is hello world. Our famous opening programming. Anytime we do introductions to programming, a lot of times we do a hello world app. So look at this. What I did was I just took this URL and I pasted it into a new tab. And sure enough, what do I get? Hello world. Yay, it works. That's awesome. Look, 2 blocks of code, and I already have something that I can talk to here. So let's have it do something a little bit more cool. And let's do a relative path. So let's send it 2 numbers. I'm going to do /number1 and / and let's do inside curlies. Let's do number 1 and then /number2 / and then inside curlies, let's put number 2 and save. Now, if I just take this URL and copy it and go over to my other window and paste it, we should not see any change because I actually haven't done anything different. The only thing different is that now in the URL, we see this number 1 and number 2. Now we're gonna want to feed it some information here for this number 1 and number 2. We actually want some other output other than hello world. So let's do something with these 2 numbers. Let's add an action and let's create a variable. And let's say we're going to need to initialize the variable. And add action, variables, and initialize variables. And we're going to call it, let's say float. Float will allow us to deal with decimal points. So let's do that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these 2 numbers. So in here, let's call the name result. And down here, I'm going to use an expression. And we're going to use dynamic content. And when we use dynamic content, look at this. I got number 1 and number 2 automatically. It says this is a path parameter. Means it's being passed in the URL into this app, into this Logic app. So I'm going to say number 1. And let's just copy this. Whoop. And go to my expression. Now, multiply. And there's extra curlies in here we have to take out. So multiply. The trigger output, relative path, number 1. Let's paste it again, except this time we're going to say number 2. And put a closing parenthesis. Whoa, it does not like that. How come it doesn't like that? Multiply. Oh, because I forgot to remove those extra characters at the beginning of that one. expression is invalid. Let's try. Problem. Let's just look at this one more time. Let's troubleshoot as we go here. So let's say number 1, comma, let's say number 1, comma, number 2. Save. Oh, actually, let's turn this into text. Let's turn this into text string. Here we go. Number 1, comma, number 2. And now instead of hello world with a W, that's the first time I noticed that. Well, that was a mistake on my part. Let's do result, save. And now we should get our 2 numbers. And if I run it right now, probably, oh, there we go, number 1 and number 2. So now let's replace these with some numbers and see what we have. Let's say 2, and number 2 is going to be a 5. All right, 2 and 5. Cool. So that comes over here. And now let's see if we can do something with these. Let's do float again, and we're going to say the expression is dynamic content. Let's get number 1. Whoop, I'll copy that. I'm just clicking in here and I'm doing Control A to copy. You can cut and then go to expression and paste. And I'm taking out the end curly, and I'm taking out these beginning 2 characters here. I don't need those. I'm going to highlight this and copy it so I can have it in my clipboard. And so we have, I know what I did. I made a mistake. I modified the trigger output before. I should not have done that. So let's multiply that number with the next number and call the next one number 2. All right, let's see if it'll let me do that. Yay. And result. All right, so now if I run this again, I should get 2 times 5. Ooh, error. What happened? So let's go to runs history. We can see what happened. It did not like that expression. All right, what is wrong with the expression? Multiply trigger outputs from number 1 and trigger outputs from number 2. Well, that seems like there's no problem there. Let's just change this to an integer and see what happens. Does not like this formula. Let's just, instead of using this multiply, let's do add. Let's try add. Update, save. Over here. And on that. We're still getting an error. Why are we getting an error? We don't want errors. Okay, what is this guy telling us? Unable to process template language, expression, and action. Initialize variable. Add expects first parameter to be an integer, a float, or a decimal. I think what we're doing here is we're telling it we're sending strings into this right here. I think it automatically thinks this is a string. So let's do this, edit, and let's create an action. And let's say variables. Real-time troubleshooting with Dana Morrison. And let's say it's going to be a initialize variable. We're going to call it number 1, and we're going to call it a float. And then we're going to say dynamic expression is number 1, except what we're going to do is pop that over here, take out the last curly Q, take out the at curly Q at the beginning. And then we're going to say float, and then put this whole thing inside those parentheses, add action. And we're going to say variables. We're going to say initialize a variable. We're going to call this one number 2. And now we're going to say it's also a float. And we're going to say it's from number 2. I'm going to copy that, go over to expression, paste it, take out the end curly, take out the beginning at curly, float, and do that. Okay, save, and initialize variable. All right, so now we're initializing the result. So now, instead, see, now this is still calling the previous. And we're gonna call from number 1. The variables number 1. We're going to say add, and then we're going to do comma. We're going to say number 2. Variables number 2, and then close that with a ending parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and we're going to see what we get now. Yay, 5 plus 2 is 7. All right, so now instead of doing an add, let's do a multiply. Save and run. Cool. So we just actually built an API call from start to finish that adds or multiplies 2 numbers together. So now we can change those numbers to whatever we want. Whoop. Let's come back over here. And let's do number 1 is going to be 367. And number 2 is going to be 853. And there we go. 313051. You can check my math, but I'm pretty sure it's right. There you go. So we just did an API call to multiply numbers. Now, this is super simple, right? This is just an easy way to do this. This is just an easy little flow to kind of like test how to build an API call using Logic Apps. Now, some of you out there are going to be like, well, what about this URL? If you're making this call out in public, then this URL is going to be exposed. Well, that's actually not true. If it has an HTTPS, then the only thing that's going to show if somebody's sniffing traffic, they're going to be able to see only that much. Everything else is going to be encrypted. So if this was just an HTTP request, absolutely. Somebody would be able to sniff the traffic in full. But this is actually pretty secure. There you go. You could also add some sort of check in here. Like if you wanted to make sure that somebody had an API key, you could actually create a variable called an API key. And then you could do a condition, all sorts of complicated things, but let's not get into that right now. Let's just stop there. Very simple API request to multiply 2 numbers. See ya.